The strange thing about financial struggle is that it rarely looks like struggle from the outside. If you feel behind financially, it probably isn't because you made reckless decisions or ignored reality. It's far more likely that you made reasonable choices, safe choices, choices that made sense at the time, choices that were socially acceptable, choices that didn't cause immediate pain. And that's exactly why they're so dangerous. Most people assume financial success comes down to discipline, intelligence, or knowing the right strategies. And if you spend enough time online, you'll find no shortage of people telling you exactly which strategies those are. The right budget, the right investment account, the right percentage to save. And yet, most people who consume that content don't meaningfully change their financial lives. Not because the strategies are wrong, but because strategy isn't usually the problem. When you actually observe how people live, earn, spend, and worry about money, a different pattern appears. People don't usually fail at money in one dramatic moment. They drift, slowly, quietly, often while telling themselves they're being responsible. That's why I want to talk about the 7 levels of personal finance, not 7 income brackets, not 7 net worth milestones. Those frameworks exist and they have their place, but they miss something important. 2 people can have the exact same salary and live in completely different financial realities. 2 people can have the exact same net worth and experience money in completely opposite ways. One with dread, one with peace. So these levels aren't about what you earn or what you own. They're about how money actually functions in your life, how it feels, how much control you genuinely have, and what's quietly running in the background driving all of your decisions. As I go through these, don't listen with judgment. Listen with recognition. The goal isn't to label yourself as behind or ahead. The goal is to understand where you actually are, because clarity is the only thing that makes movement possible. The first level is survival mode. At this level, money is always reacting to something. A bill arrives, a deadline approaches, something breaks, something unexpected happens. Decisions are made under pressure. And pressure has a way of shrinking your time horizon down to almost nothing. You're not thinking about next year. You're thinking about next week, sometimes the next few days. People in survival mode are often labeled irresponsible. That label is almost always wrong. The defining trait of this level isn't poor character. It isn't bad values. It's the absence of margin. There is no buffer, no room to absorb even small disruptions. Every expense feels urgent, personal, and emotionally heavy, because it is. When there's no cushion between you and the next problem, everything feels like a crisis, because everything genuinely could become one. The emotional state here is exhaustion, not laziness, not apathy, exhaustion. Mental exhaustion from constantly calculating. Emotional exhaustion from constantly bracing. You're not thinking about optimization or future planning. Not because you're incapable of it, but because constant stress consumes the exact cognitive resources that planning requires. Research on scarcity supports this. When people are under financial pressure, measurable cognitive bandwidth decreases. It's not a character flaw, it's a neurological reality. Survival mode doesn't just feel hard. It is hard in ways that compound on themselves. And while people often tell themselves this level is temporary, a phase, a rough patch, something that will pass, many stay here far longer than they expected. Not because they lack ability, but because escaping requires energy that survival mode systematically takes away. Eventually, some people escape survival mode, and they assume they've made it. What they've really done is reach level 2. The second level is fragile stability. Here, the bills are paid. Life appears normal. Routines exist. From the outside, everything looks fine. You're not behind. You're not drowning. If someone asked, you'd probably say you're doing okay. But underneath that surface is a quiet, persistent understanding that the stability is delicate. One interruption could unravel it. One delayed paycheck. One car repair. One medical bill that arrives on the wrong month. Nothing dramatic is happening. But there's also no real security. Just the temporary absence of disruption. This is the level where people say things like, "We're fine. We just have to be careful." And that sounds responsible. But what it actually means is that peace is conditional. Peace exists only as long as nothing goes wrong. And the knowledge that things can always go wrong lives somewhere just beneath the surface, influencing decisions in ways you might not even consciously recognize. At this level, anxiety often doesn't announce itself loudly. It lives in the background. It shows up as hesitation, as caution, as a constant low-level scanning for what could go wrong. And while that vigilance can feel mature, like you're being realistic, it also limits movement. When you're always defending, you're rarely building. The third level is comfortable but stuck. This is where most adults spend the majority of their financial lives. And I say that not as a judgment, but as an observation. And honestly, as a warning. At this level, nothing hurts enough to force change. The bills are paid, the stress is manageable, life feels fine. There might even be occasional vacations, dinners out, things that feel like rewards for working hard. And because life feels fine, progress quietly stops. There's no crisis demanding action, no emergency pushing reflection. You're not panicked, you're not desperate, you're just settled. And settled is seductive. Picture this: a direct deposit notification lands. Someone exhales, orders dinner, tells themselves they'll sit down and look at their finances this weekend. The weekend comes. There's a game on. The kids need something. Monday arrives faster than expected. And the finances wait another week, then another month, then somehow another year. This is where people tell themselves they'll get serious about money later. Once things slow down. Once work is less busy. Once the kids are a little older. Once the next raise comes through. Once something changes. But here's the thing about once something changes. Comfort doesn't create change. Discomfort creates change. And at this level, there isn't enough discomfort to generate movement. So years pass. And if you've ever had the quiet, unsettling thought, I should be further along by now, there's a very strong chance this is where you are. Not because you failed, but because comfort has been doing exactly what comfort does. Filling available space, replacing momentum with routine, making the status quo feel more permanent than it actually is. The danger of this level isn't recklessness, it's passivity. And passivity is invisible, which is what makes it so effective at keeping people still. Some people become aware of this stall. They feel it. They sense something is off, even when they can't name it. And that awareness matters. But awareness, on its own, isn't progress. The fourth level is awareness without change. At this level, you understand what you should be doing. You consume financial content, videos, podcasts, articles, threads. You know the language. You know the concepts. You can explain what an emergency fund should look like. You understand compound interest, at least in theory. You've probably made a budget at least once, maybe twice. But your behavior hasn't shifted much. Someone at this level opens a brokerage app, stares at it for 30 seconds. The interface feels unfamiliar, slightly intimidating. They close it. Open Instagram instead. Later that night, they watch a 40-minute video about index funds. They feel informed. They feel like they're making progress. They go to sleep having done nothing different than the night before. That's not a failure of intelligence. It's a failure of the gap between knowing and doing. And it's one of the most frustrating places to live, because it removes the excuse of ignorance without delivering results. You can't tell yourself you just don't know enough. You do know enough. And yet your outcomes look roughly the same as before. Over time, that gap creates something specific. Not just frustration, but self-doubt. A quiet, corrosive question. If I know what I should be doing and I'm still not doing it, what does that say about me? Here's what it actually says. It says you're human. Information and behavior are controlled by different systems. Knowing something is true doesn't automatically make you act on it. That's not weakness. That's just how people work. But something does have to change. And it's not more information. More information at this stage is like adding books to a shelf that no one reads. It creates the feeling of productivity without the substance of it. What's actually missing isn't knowledge, it's intention. And intention requires something most people resist. A real, honest look at what your current behavior is actually producing, and a decision, not a wish, not a hope, but a decision that you're done staying where you are. That decision is what opens the door to level 5. The 5th level is intentional control. At this stage, money stops feeling mysterious or adversarial. You know where it goes. You're no longer afraid to look at the numbers. Decisions feel deliberate instead of reactive. You're not guessing. You're not avoiding. You're engaged. This doesn't mean you're wealthy. It doesn't mean everything is optimized. It means you're conscious. You've replaced chaos with clarity. And for most people who reach this level, the primary emotion isn't excitement or pride. It's something quieter and more significant. It's relief. The noise drops. The background anxiety that you didn't even fully realize was there begins to fade. You feel, maybe for the first time, like you're actually in charge of where your financial life is going. Control at this stage still takes effort. You have to pay attention. You have to make active choices. Some days it feels easy. Some days it feels like work. That's normal. But here's what starts to happen. Every intentional decision builds evidence. Evidence that you can do this. Evidence that you're not the kind of person who avoids money. You're the kind of person who manages it. And that identity shift, as small as it might seem, is one of the most powerful things that can happen at this stage. Because the next level isn't about trying harder. It's about trying less. The 6th level is systems and resilience. Here, the structural decisions have already been made. A portion of every paycheck moves automatically into savings, into investments, before you have a chance to think about it or talk yourself out of it. You're not relying on willpower anymore. You're not relying on motivation. You built the system during a clear-headed moment. And now it runs quietly in the background whether you're paying attention or not. This matters more than it sounds. Willpower is depletable. Motivation is unreliable. But systems work even on bad days. When you're tired, when you're overwhelmed, when life gets complicated, and money is the last thing you want to think about. At this level, you don't have to want to save. It's already happening. What systems also do, and this is underappreciated, is remove emotion from the equation. At earlier levels, every financial decision carries weight. Should I move this money? Is this the right time? What if I need it? At level 6, those questions have already been answered. The decisions were made once, deliberately, and now they execute without requiring anything from you emotionally. Money moves, investments grow, and your mental energy goes toward your life instead of toward managing financial anxiety. And when shocks arrive, because they always do, They're inconvenient rather than catastrophic. The car breaks down and it's annoying, not devastating. The unexpected bill arrives and you handle it without unraveling. You've built a financial life that is resilient by design, not by luck. Not by having more money than everyone else, but by having made decisions in advance so that your worst days don't become your worst financial decisions. People at this stage often describe it with something deceptively simple. They say, I can breathe. Not, I'm rich. Not, I've made it. Just, I can breathe. And anyone who has spent real time at levels 1, 2, or 3 knows exactly how much weight is packed into that sentence. The 7th level is financial self-trust. Every previous level is fundamentally about building something external: emergency funds, budgets, investment accounts, automated systems. All of that is real and necessary. But level 7 isn't defined by any of those things. It's defined by something internal. At this level, you trust yourself with money, not because you're perfect or never make mistakes, but because you've developed enough history with your own decisions to know that you're capable of navigating whatever comes. You don't chase trends, not because you're uninformed, but because you know they're not for you. You don't constantly compare your financial life to other people's, not because you've stopped caring about growth, but because you're clear enough on your own direction that comparison loses its pull. You know why you're saving. You know what you're investing toward. You know what kind of life you're actually building, not the life that looks impressive, not the life that earns approval, but the life that genuinely aligns with what you value. Money supports that life instead of distracting from it. This level is rare, not because it requires a specific number in a bank account, but because it requires maturity that only comes from lived experience. The ability to tolerate boredom when everyone around you is chasing something exciting. The ability to stay consistent when nothing feels urgent. The ability to define success on your own terms and actually live by it. Here's the most important thing I want you to take from this. The goal is not to sprint to level 7. For most people, the most significant jump isn't from the bottom to the top. It's from level 3 to level 5, from comfortable to intentional, from fine to forward. That jump doesn't require a financial overhaul. It requires honesty about where you actually are, what you're quietly avoiding, and what staying comfortable is slowly costing you. Money doesn't punish irresponsibility nearly as much as it punishes passivity. Irresponsibility is loud. It creates consequences you can see and respond to. Passivity is silent. It just slowly converts potential into routine and time into something you can't recover. So here's the only question worth sitting with after this. Which level am I actually in? Not which level you want to be in. Which level, honestly, accurately describes how money functions in your life right now? And then, what would moving up one level look like? Not 10 steps. One level. That's how real financial lives are built. Quietly. Intentionally. One level at a time.